She was only 12, but her heart worked like it was 80. Every breath came with a soft hiss from the small oxygen tank by her side, a sound that had become part of our family's rhythm. Still, she smiled through it. Every morning, she'd sit on our porch to feel the sunlight and wave to the neighbors before her online classes started. Until one afternoon, the HOA president, the kind everyone in the neighborhood whispered about, came storming up our steps. She pointed at the oxygen tank and said it was unsightly and against community presentation rules. My daughter tried to explain, her voice shaking. "It helps me breathe." The woman just rolled her eyes. And that's when I pulled into the driveway, badge still clipped to my belt, uniform still on from duty. She had no idea who I was. Before we go on, hit subscribe, so stories like this reach you first. We moved into that neighborhood because it was supposed to be peaceful. Quiet streets, green lawns, the kind of place where you could hear birds in the morning instead of sirens. I'd spent 22 years in law enforcement. I was tired of chaos. I wanted calm for my family, especially for my daughter, Lily. Lily was born with a congenital heart defect. The doctors called it delicate, but she called it her tiny motor. She'd say, "Dad, my engine's just slower than everyone else's, but it still runs." She had more courage in her small frame than half the men I'd trained with. Surgery after surgery, setback after setback. She'd smile through it, always asking if she could go back to school, back to her friends, back to normal. When her doctors finally said she could attend classes online from home, we built her a little world on our front porch. Her chair, her plants, her books, and the small oxygen tank she needed when her heart worked too hard. It became her spot. Every morning she'd wave to the mailman, draw in her sketchbook and say, "Dad, I'm getting my sunlight points for the day." The neighbors mostly smiled and waved back. Mostly. There was one exception. A woman named Margaret Hale, head of the Homeowners Association. People called her Marge, but behind closed doors, they had another name for her, HOA Karen. She was the kind of person who could find a problem in perfection. Your grass was too tall. Your mailbox was an inch too high. Your car looked commercial. She ruled the cul-de-sac like a mayor of misery. At first, she left us alone. Maybe the badge on my truck made her think twice. But after a few months, small things started happening. We'd get notices about visible medical equipment on the porch, a complaint about unapproved furniture, Lily's chair, then one about clutter, the oxygen tank. Each letter was signed in the same neat cursive, Margaret Hale, HOA President. My wife Emma tried to smooth things over. "Maybe she just doesn't understand," she said. But I knew people like Margaret. I'd dealt with hundreds of them. Control dressed as concern. One afternoon, I came home early from the station. Lily was on the porch reading. Marge was standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, talking to another board member. She wasn't whispering. "It just looks bad," Marge said. "We can't have medical clutter on display like that. It brings down property value." The other woman shifted uncomfortably. "But she's a child, Marge. She's sick," Marge scoffed. "I'm not heartless. I'm just enforcing the rules." I stepped out of the car and she went quiet, just smiled that polite, frozen smile. "Afternoon, Chief," she said. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Sure is," I replied. "Especially when people remember to be kind." Her smile cracked for a second, then returned. "Just doing my job." I didn't say anything else. But that night, I told Emma, if she crosses the line again, I'll handle it. A week later, she did. Emma had gone to the grocery store and I was working late. Lily was outside sketching as always. According to the neighbor's doorbell camera, which I'd see later, Marge marched up the walkway with a clipboard, waving a violation notice. She started lecturing my daughter about improper equipment on private property, about community uniformity. When Lily tried to explain, calm, polite, the way we'd taught her, Marge told her, "Maybe if your parents cared about following the rules, you wouldn't need all this junk out here." Lily froze. She didn't even know what to say. The neighbor across the street stepped out and called, "Hey, she's just a kid!" But Marge ignored her. That's when I turned into the street. My patrol car lights weren't on. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift and was pulling in to surprise Lily with her favorite smoothie. I saw Marge on the porch, finger pointed. I saw my daughter's face, pale, shaking, terrified. And I felt something deep in my chest I hadn't felt in years. That slow burn. The one that comes right before a storm. But training teaches you this. Power means restraint. So I parked, stepped out, and walked up quietly, my badge catching the sunlight. Marge turned around, her words stopped mid-air. She blinked at my uniform, the patch on my sleeve, the badge on my chest. Officer, Chief Kane. But I already knew exactly what she'd been doing. And for the first time, the neighborhood saw the look on her face change, from pride to panic. Marge froze when she saw me coming up the porch steps. Her voice, loud a second ago, shrank to a nervous tremor. Oh, Chief Kane, I was just having a friendly talk with your daughter. You know, about porch safety? I looked at Lily. Her oxygen tube trembled slightly where it ran from the tank beside her chair. Her hands were shaking, not from anger, but from fear and exhaustion. I crouched down beside her. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded slowly. She said I can't have my chair out here anymore. Marge cleared her throat. That's not what I said. I simply mentioned. I stood up. Marge, I said quietly, you're standing on my property, talking to my minor daughter without a parent present. That's trespassing, and intimidation on top of it. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Patel, called out, She's been bothering that poor child all week. More doors opened. Curtains moved. The neighborhood that had always watched in silence was suddenly watching for real. Marge's mask cracked again. This is ridiculous. I'm just enforcing HOA regulations. No personal medical devices can be stored or displayed in public view. It's in the handbook. I took a deep breath. You know what else is in the law, Marge? The Americans with Disabilities Act. It says you can't discriminate or harass someone over their medical condition or their accessibility needs. Her face went pale. I wasn't. You were, I said evenly. And it's on camera. I pointed toward the corner of the roof, where my security camera's little red light blinked quietly. Marge stammered. Chief, you don't understand. I was just trying to maintain standards. I stepped closer. My daughter's standard is staying alive, Marge. That oxygen tank isn't clutter. It's her lifeline. The street had gone dead quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop for a second. She took a step back. I didn't mean harm. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. And right now, the impact is that a 12-year-old girl feels unsafe sitting on her own porch. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Lily whispered, Dad, can I go inside? I nodded, my voice softening instantly. Of course, sweetheart. She wheeled her little oxygen tank inside and closed the screen door behind her. I turned back to Marge. You have two choices, I said calmly. You can apologize and we'll handle this civilly, or I can document this as an incident, harassment of a disabled minor. Then it leaves my hands. Her lips tightened. Pride is a dangerous thing. Even when cornered, it refuses to surrender. I'll have to bring this up at the next HOA meeting, she said stiffly. There are procedures, then I'll bring the ADA, the city attorney, and Channel 4 News, I said flatly. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't, I gave her a steady look. You've spent years policing mailboxes, fences, and flowers. Maybe it's time someone policed you. She took a shaky breath, clutching her clipboard like a shield. This isn't over. Then you'd better make sure your next move's legal, I said, and turned toward the door. That night, Lily didn't sleep well. She asked me, Dad, am I making trouble for you? That cut deeper than anything Marge could have said. No, baby, I said, holding her hand. You didn't make trouble. You showed me where the real trouble lives. When she finally fell asleep, I opened my laptop and started typing. First, a full incident report, logged through the department, filed as both a harassment complaint and ADA violation. Second, a letter addressed to the HOA board. Subject, unlawful harassment and discrimination against disabled resident. I wrote every word with surgical precision, professional, but burning beneath the surface. I attached the video stills showing Marge on my porch, finger raised at my daughter, her face twisted in disdain. Then I sent copies to the city council, the local news station, and, just for good measure, the mayor's office. By morning, the message had spread faster than any HOA memo could. When I drove Lily to her doctor's appointment that afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Emails from neighbors, calls from people I barely knew, even officers from other districts. "Chief, that's your kid on the news, isn't it?" "Good on you for standing up." By evening, the story had hit the local feed. HOA accused of harassing child with medical condition. Father revealed to be police chief. Marge must have seen it too, because she showed up at our house again that night and no clipboard this time. Her lipstick was gone, her hair flat, her confidence broken. She stood on the porch like she was stepping onto sacred ground. "Chief, I wanted to apologize," she said softly. "I didn't realize the situation fully." I studied her face. "You didn't realize she was human?" Her eyes filled with tears. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, hard to tell which. I thought I was keeping order." "I didn't mean for it to get so ugly." I nodded slowly. That's how it always starts. People think they're keeping order, until someone gets hurt. She looked down. "I'll resign from the HOA, and I'll write a public apology." "Don't write it for me," I said quietly. "Write it for the next family you'd have done this to." She nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. Inside, Lily peeked through the window. "Is she gone?" "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "She's gone." "Good," she whispered. "Then maybe tomorrow I can sit on my porch again." I knelt beside her. "Not maybe," I said. "You will." By the end of the week, it wasn't just a neighborhood story. It had turned into a case. The HOA board had called for an emergency meeting, and this time, the room wasn't the cozy living room of Marge's house with cookies and coffee. It was the community center, standing room only. People who never cared about HOA meetings before showed up tonight. They wanted to see what would happen. When I walked in, the whispers spread fast. Some people nodded in respect. Others looked away, ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. Lily stayed home with her aunt. She didn't need to relive this. But I brought her photo, not to prove a point, but to remind people of the face behind their rules. At the front table sat Marge, pale and trembling behind her stack of papers. Her clipboard was missing, her confidence gone. Beside her, the HOA vice president, a nervous man named Dale, tried to keep order. "Chief Kane," he said as I stepped up to the mic, "we appreciate your attendance tonight. This meeting is meant to resolve—" "To resolve," I interrupted softly, "why a sick child was targeted in her own home under the guise of community order." The room went quiet. Marge shifted in her seat. "Chief, with respect, this isn't a criminal case. It's a misunderstanding." I clicked a button on my laptop. The screen behind me lit up, a still frame from my porch camera. Marge's finger pointed directly at Lily's chest, the girl shrinking back in her chair. "Is this a misunderstanding?" I asked quietly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "That's disgusting." Marge's face flushed crimson. "That image doesn't show the full context." "Oh, I have the full context," I said evenly. I pressed play. The audio filled the room. "You can't keep that thing out here. This neighborhood has standards. It's her oxygen tank. She needs it. Then she can stay inside like the rest of the sick ones." The words hung in the air like poison. Even Dale closed his eyes, shaking his head. When the video ended, no one clapped. No one spoke. The silence itself was a verdict. I took a breath and said, "My daughter has a congenital heart defect. Every breath she takes is a battle. We moved here because we thought this was a safe neighborhood, a place where she could sit in the sunlight without being judged for surviving." A woman in the back started to cry. I continued, "Marge didn't just break a rule. She broke a child's peace, and she broke federal law. The Americans with Disabilities Act protects access, visibility, and dignity. You can't legislate empathy, but you can enforce it." Marge rose from her seat, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for her to feel unsafe. I was trying to enforce what's written." I turned to her. "Rules exist to serve people, not to punish them for existing." The room erupted in quiet murmurs. People nodded. Some even applauded softly. One older man stood up from the second row. I was on that board when the rule about visible medical equipment was added. We never meant for it to apply to life-saving devices. We just didn't want junk in the yard, but this was cruel. Marge's lips trembled. I didn't think. That's the problem, I said. You didn't think? You judged. I stepped back from the mic. I don't need to ruin anyone's life, but I'll be damned if I let this happen to another kid. Not in my city. At that, the mayor, who'd quietly entered during the meeting, stood up from the back. Her presence shifted the energy instantly. Chief Kane, she said, thank you for speaking. This isn't just an HOA issue anymore. I've reviewed the complaint, the footage, and the reports you filed. The city will be investigating potential discrimination and harassment under state and federal law. The audience buzzed. Whispers, gasps, phones recording. Marge's shoulders collapsed. Please, I didn't know she was your daughter. That line hit harder than anything else. I turned slowly. So if she wasn't my daughter, if she belonged to a family without a badge, you'd have treated her the same way. She froze. Her silence was her answer. I let the weight of it hang for a long, painful moment. Then I said, that's exactly why I'm here. The mayor nodded at me. We'll be issuing new guidelines across all HOA organizations in the district. Accessibility isn't optional. It's the law. The crowd broke into applause. Real applause this time. Not loud or theatrical, but honest. The kind that means finally someone said what needed saying. When I turned to leave, people stopped me. Chief, thank you for standing up. You're a good man. I'm sorry we didn't speak sooner. I just nodded. Next time, don't wait for someone to wear a badge before you do what's right. Outside, the cool air hit me like a clean breath after holding one too long. The night sky stretched dark and quiet above the cul-de-sac, the same street where my daughter had been made to feel small. Now it felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was listening. When I got home, Lily was awake, her tablet glowing in her lap. She looked up when I walked in. How did it go, Dad? I knelt beside her. It's over, she blinked. Did you yell at her? I smiled. Didn't need to. The truth did the yelling? She giggled, the soft sound filling the room like warmth. I showed her the letter the mayor had sent me on my phone, an official notice about new accessibility enforcement for neighborhood associations. Lily read the first line aloud. In honor of the bravery and resilience of one young resident, we reaffirm our commitment to protecting all citizens with medical challenges. Her eyes widened. They wrote that for me? Yeah, I said, voice tight with pride. They did. She smiled. Not wide, just a quiet, tired smile that meant she felt seen. The next morning, when she wheeled her chair back out onto the porch, the neighbors across the street waved. One man brought over flowers. Another offered to repaint the fence. And there, in the distance, Marge's house was quiet, curtains drawn. For once, silence from her side felt like peace. Lily looked up at the sunrise and whispered, It's beautiful today. Yeah, I said, watching the golden light spill across the porch. And you're free to sit in it as long as you want. She took a deep breath through her tube. One long, full breath that sounded like hope. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't hear the sound of fear in our home. Only air, only life, only the promise that sometimes justice doesn't arrive. With flashing lights, it arrives quietly when a father stands up and a community finally wakes up. The morning after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt different. Cars drove slowly, people waved, children ran freely on lawns that just yesterday had seemed oppressive. It wasn't just relief, it was recognition. A shared understanding that one small voice could ripple into a tidal wave of change. The local news station had covered the story. Clips of Lily on the porch, her father standing tall in uniform, went viral. Comments flooded in. That's parenting. That's leadership. A child's rights defended by someone who truly knows responsibility. Finally, someone enforcing what really matters, humanity. But neither Lily nor I wanted the attention. The story was bigger than fame. It was about teaching people that empathy, patience, and courage were more important than rules written on paper. By the end of the week, The mayor's office had issued new directives. HOA boards in the district would now undergo mandatory training on accessibility and anti-discrimination. Families with medical needs would be given protected spaces in their homes. Letters of apology arrived from neighbors who had remained silent too long. Some were tearful. Some were stiff and formal, but each was an acknowledgement of what had been overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. One neighbor, Mr. Thompson, approached me quietly. "I didn't say anything before. I was afraid. But seeing you stand up, it made me realize I should have been braver too." I nodded. "You still can be." Lily's place in the world. With the HOA's authority weakened, Lily's porch became a safe space again. She decorated it with flowers, her sketchbooks, and small wind chimes. Neighbors stopped to talk, not to complain, but to learn. Even the mailman stayed longer, chatting about the books she read. Lily's courage had sparked more than policy changes. It had inspired a movement. The hashtag #LilyStrong appeared on social media, with people sharing stories of standing up for accessibility, kindness, and empathy in their own communities. It was a reminder. Small voices, when protected, could shake even the most rigid systems. One evening, Lily looked at me from her chair, oxygen tube humming softly. "Dad," she said, "do you think people will really change?" I put my hand on hers. "Some already have. And the rest? They'll see what we did here. They'll learn from it." She smiled faintly. "I hope they do." Community transformation months passed, and the change was tangible. The HOA board had resigned. New members were elected, younger, empathetic, and trained in accessibility compliance. Neighborhood gatherings were no longer tense or rigid. They were open and inclusive. Children played without fear of judgment. Elderly residents walked freely, medical devices visible and accepted. Lily's story reached local schools. Teachers incorporated it into lessons on civic responsibility and empathy. Other families, inspired by her resilience, started grassroots campaigns for safe spaces for children with medical needs. One parent wrote to me, "Your story gave my son courage to ask for accommodations he's needed for years." And in our neighborhood, the small porch where Lily sat became a symbol. A single chair, a tiny oxygen tank, a sketchbook, and a father who refused to let injustice go unnoticed. Media attention and national recognition. Within the year, the story went national. Magazines, news outlets, even national talk shows covered it. The narrative was simple: a sick child, a relentless HOA, and a father who didn't need to raise a fist, just a badge and his voice. Invitations poured in for interviews, but I declined most. Lily's privacy was paramount. This was never about us. It was about her, and the thousands of children and families who felt silenced every day. Still, the public impact was undeniable. Policy discussions on neighborhood accessibility emerged in multiple states. Other HOA boards revised their rules to protect residents with medical challenges. #LilyStrong became not just a hashtag, but a movement advocating for dignity and fairness. For me, the lessons ran deeper than policy. I had spent decades enforcing laws, protecting people, responding to emergencies. But I realized that the quiet battles, the ones fought in driveways, porches, and living rooms, were just as vital. Lily had taught me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, waits, and trusts the right person to act. Her small heart, fragile but unyielding, had reminded a whole community what mattered: empathy over rules, humanity over pride. I often sat on the porch beside her, my hand on her chair, just breathing, watching her draw, watching her read, watching her live without fear. The streets were calm, yes, but the world inside our home was quiet too, the kind of peace I had never known before. In the months that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Families who had been distant or disengaged started participating in community events. They painted murals about inclusivity. They planted gardens visible to all, celebrating resilience, courage, and kindness. Marge never returned to leadership. She sent a formal letter apologizing, not just to Lily, but to all families who had ever felt judged or belittled under her tenure. Even years later, neighbors would point to the small porch and say, "That's where it all changed." Lily's courage had become the cornerstone of the community. It wasn't loud or violent. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about justice, awareness, and the slow, persistent power of standing up for what's right. One spring morning, the sun spilled across the porch. Lily wheeled her chair outside, her small sketchbook open. Flowers bloomed along the walkway. Neighbors waved. Birds sang. I knelt beside her, brushing dirt off the edge of a pot. "You see, Bud?" I whispered. "This is what happens when you never let anyone take away your light." She looked at me, eyes wide and serious. "I know, Dad, and people see it too," I smiled. "They do. And it's just getting started." As the camera panned out, the sun casting long golden rays over the neighborhood, it was clear. One father, one child, and one small act of courage had changed everything. Sometimes the greatest badge you wear isn't on your chest. It's in the courage you protect in the heart of a child. Before we go on, hit subscribe, so stories like this reach you first.